Good morning, Pankaj sir.
Good morning. Good morning, Suresh, for you.
I am fine, sir. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity. My students are very much eager to have a conversation with you today.
Great to be here.
So today our speaker will be Vasundhara.
Mhm.
So can we start?
Yes,
Hello,
please.
sir. Good morning. If people believe they share values with a company, they will stay loyal to the brand. Good morning to our respected guests and the students of IIBM Batch 2022. I'm Vasundhara Singh Bani, moderator for this session, and it's a great pleasure for me to be a part of it. I hereby welcome you all for today's insightful session on strategic planning of brands. This session is going to be of an hour, followed by questionnaires at the end. It gives me an immense pleasure to introduce you with our guest for this session, Mr. Pankaj Rai. He currently is the Senior Vice President Strategy VP at Wells Fargo, Bangaon area, India, where he drives transformation by enabling the three E's: effectiveness, efficiency, and experience. He has more than 10 years of experience as director in analytics at Dell, where he was leading a team in the area of business research, data analysis, and statistical modeling in various domains like marketing, strategy, pricing online, supply chain, and financial services. He has also worked as the business planning manager and strategy director at Standard Chartered Bank for 1 year. He was the head of program management office at Scope International, subsidiary of Standard Chartered Bank for 6 months. He also worked at GE Capital Commerce Finance business for 4 years, where he was head of Six Sigma in operations and technology for 7 months, head of portfolio management for 1 month, head of regional undertaking for 6 months. He completed his MBA, Masters in Business Administration in General Management from IIM Ahmedabad in 1993. He did his BTech in Electrical Engineering from IIT Delhi. So now I would request our guest, Pankaj sir, to take the session further. Sir, you may continue.
Okay. So I think the other people will not be visible, right?
No,
You know,
sir.
so everyone will be, their videos will be off.
Yes, sir.
Okay. These days, technology is creating these issues. Sometimes, you feel like you want to see people, but there are empty screens. Anyway, so I guess everyone here is a first year student doing their management education, right? So what I thought was, I think I will talk about the brand, which is more a personal brand than a company brand. Usually brands are associated with a corporate brand or a product brand or whatever. I think many of us don't look at ourselves as a brand as well. So I think my talk today will more about my story, my reflections, my learnings, and sharing some of those with you. And I think this would fit more of thinking about what your personal brand is, what do you want to be, and how to think about your career and so forth. So that's what I would hope to sort of share with you. And I'll try to do this in two parts. One, I'll just share with you my story and my learnings, and then have some more question and answer. So I would rather have more Q&A rather than just narrate my own story. So I guess we have overall close to an hour, right, Mayuresh? So I'll probably try and do in 20 to 30 minutes some sharing, and then we'll do more Q&A.
Sure, sir.
So yeah, so I think while some of the data was shared about me on what I have done and who I am, let me share with you my story in my own words, because then I think I can bring out some of the lessons that I have learned and some of the things that I would like to share with you, and then hopefully look for your feedback and your questions after that. So my story started, a day before I was born. Mrs. Gandhi nationalized all the banks. The day that I was born, Neil Armstrong landed on the moon. Now, I don't know whether any of you know some of those years or dates or whatever, but I was born on 21st of July 1969. That was supposedly a giant leap for mankind. My first, 8 or 9 years, I lived in a factory town. My dad used to work in a fertilizer factory, and that factory, these factory towns that exist. So I was in Gorakhpur. There they had a factory. That factory later on closed down, like many other factories keep closing down. But 8, 9 years were there. By the way, I was known as Apollo in those days. Apollo was, by the way, the name of the craft that landed on the moon. So that's how my grandfather had named me. Then my dad got promoted slash transferred, moved to Delhi. So I spent the next 25 years growing up in Delhi, schooling, college, early work experiences. And then briefly, I was in Singapore. In the last 16 years, I have been living in Bangalore. So when people ask me, where are you from? I have a hard time answering that question because my father always felt that he's from UP. I, for a while, felt that I was from Delhi, but now my daughters tell me that they are from Bangalore. So I found a smart answer to people when they ask me where you are from. I said, don't worry about where you are coming from. Let's focus on where we are headed. So right now I'm in Bangalore, and I think likely to remain in Bangalore for a long time to come. On the uh, professional side, most of you, because I will probably resemble your parents, would probably relate to the idea that in those days there weren't too many professions to choose from. You could be a doctor or engineer. That's what I think people wanted. Actually, the third used to be also civil servants. So in my grandfather's generation, he would always say that you should be an IAS officer and things of that nature. So anyway, so those were the few professions that used to exist. And my father didn't want to take any chances with me, so he made sure that I studied physics, chemistry, maths, biology, so that I can stand for both those exams, whether it is doctor or this thing. So एक नहीं मिला तो दूसरा तो मिल जाएगा. So that is the environment. My brother, who was 2 years younger than me, was smarter. He chose mechanical drawing, so he could take only half the exam because my father made sure I took two sets of exams, all engineering exams, all medical exams, and he made sure that he took me on a scooter and stayed outside so that I finished the exam and come out and not run away. So those were the early days of life. Obviously, I think the lesson over there is that most of us did not have too many choices, and our parents tended to determine what we needed to do, and we followed that. And given that choices were little, whatever you got, you felt very grateful about it. So if you just take this engineering and doctor, in my biology class, I used to get scared of dissection and made I could run away and things like that. So I was very scared of doing some of those things. So the moment I got an engineering admission, I stopped taking any further medical examination. I said I can't be a doctor, and anyway I have secured a seat in the engineering college, so I'll do that. So the decision making was based on elimination, not necessarily that I liked engineering. It's because I did not like biology. And I would say that a lot of things that happened in the last 20, 30 years, and maybe you can relate to some of those things in your parent generation, were more by elimination. We would do things not because we liked them, but we would do things because we hated the other options, or this was the only option available and there was none. So that's how I think many things were. In fact, I would say even the arranged marriage that many of us in our generation went through will fall into that category, because the decision making wasn't because you liked someone and therefore you married each other, because there was nothing wrong in them, and then your parents wanted to get you married, that you sort of got married. So many of those things that were there in those days were of a very different variety than what we see today. So I think it's important to also take out lessons on why things were happening in a certain way, and whether if the conditions have changed, do they still need to happen in a certain way. So I think the conditions clearly have changed. There are more choices now, there are more options, there are more ways to think about it. So the decision making model of the past doesn't need to stay in the same way that it used to be there. So anyway, so I'll keep sort of bringing up some reflection that I've had on some of these stages in life and to share with you, and later on I'll try and summarize all of them as well. Going further, I think after engineering, what people used to do was, in those days again, going to the US, studying for higher education was one option that many people pursued, or some people who stayed back typically would do an MBA. I mean, those are again two different options. Now, the going abroad was a very popular thing, so I also took the exam, GRE and so on. And I think the good thing that I realized the foreign universities do is to ask you actually for a statement of purpose. So they actually make you write, and why do you want to do this? I don't think any of us in those days used to think about any of these things. So when I wrote 2 or 3 statements of purpose on why I want to do masters in electrical engineering, I was reasonably sure that I had no reason to be doing that, because frankly, it wasn't as if I was excited about bachelor's in electrical engineering to be excited about masters. So I then stopped applying. I had got those forms. I had applied to a couple of places where I stopped applying because I realized that wasn't something I wanted to do. And I would say thankfully I got admission into a B school, And I said, chalo, this might be the savior. Just like, I don't want to do biology, so engineering might be a way out. Since I don't want to do masters in electrical engineering, MBA might be the day out, not because I thought engineering, MBA would be a good thing for me and so on. So MBA school was good. You learned a different set of things, different exposure, different types of people. It wasn't all full of all engineers. There were people with different backgrounds. All of you probably find that as well, and so on and so forth. People with experience, people without experience. So it was a different experience. And then my first job out of college again was, what was available on campus and what I got through. There was a company called Feedback Ventures, which was a management consulting company. Back in 93, when I graduated from college, management consulting wasn't a industry as such. I think McKinsey had entered India just the previous year. So then people got to know that there's something called management consulting and so on and so forth. And Feedback was a startup kind of a company started by some Ahmedabad graduates. And they were doing something similar, but in a more limited way. So there were some seniors who came on and they said, this is a good company, you learn a lot, consulting will be nice. So I joined that company. And in 2 years, I realized that there wasn't so much that I knew already that I could be advising CEOs on what they should do. And at that point in time, there was a friend of mine who used to work in ICICI, which was in those days a financial institution. Now it has become a large commercial bank where they would do project loans. So he called me, he said, yeah, what are you doing in consulting? You should join ICICI. It's a nice company, good job, all that. So I met his boss. His boss was a guy called Sandeep Bakshi, who's now the MD of ICICI. So he interviewed me and he said, "Yeah, I think we can hire you." And that's how I got hired in ICICI and spent 4 years there. ICICI those days used to be a very what could I say, a government-oriented type company. It didn't pay well because the financial institution, development financial institution, it used to be called. So after 4 or 5 years, people used to say, you know what, this is a good place to learn. But at some stage, you should go join some big multinational company because they will pay you well and give you different exposure. So that used to be the thing. So many people from there would go to a Citibank or some other foreign bank and so on. I did the same. There were some seniors from ICICI who had joined G Capital. G was a big company, and they kind of offered me a job again through some friends who were there, just like my ICICI job. So I landed up there. G, of course, did live up to its true promise because it was a big multinational. It was not just a financial services company; it was a conglomerate. So I learned a lot about various other softer skills, and some of you are familiar with G. G was known for Six Sigma, leadership, all kinds of other softer things which we don't necessarily think too much about when we are young. So I think a lot of cultural learning, if I can say so, happened in G. And then after some time, again through some friends or acquaintance, I was introduced to someone in Standard Chartered Bank who was trying to set up a what should I say? They call it back office operation in Chennai and Kuala Lumpur and so on. So I got introduced to him, a guy called Romi Malhotra. He hired me into that company. So I spent 6 months in Chennai, a year in Singapore with them, and then Romi came to Dell in Bangalore in 2005. I was hired to Dell to come here. Initially, I said that I'm a banking guy. How can I work in a computer company? And then he said, all of these offshore activities are very similar in nature. There's knowledge transfer, all that. So I agreed. I came there. After a few years, data analytics team was starting up there. Someone said, can you do analytics? I said, yeah, I've been an engineer, I'm an MBA, I can do anything. So someone gave me the opportunity. I got into the data analytics field. Those days this wasn't a very fashionable term to talk about. Some other people said, what are you doing? This is such a small team. Why don't you do this other job which is like big team and so on? And I said, no, this analytics sound interesting. So I went there. Analytics became a big deal in the industry. So over time, somehow, I spent 8-9 years in Dell, overall 11 years. And then again, some friends had moved from Dell to Wells Fargo. And this was 5 years ago. So I spent 5 years in Dell, Wells Fargo now. And they said, why don't you come to Wells Fargo? You have worked in banking anyway. And this bank also is setting up these operations. And from a back office standpoint, you can utilize your knowledge of those things from your early banking days and other things and come here. So I joined there, and there I continued. So I think the lesson, if I can draw from my own career and job changes that I have done over the years, is that I have not had any major plans of what I want to be. And at different points in time, people have said this might be an interesting one for you. And my job changes have happened just by that chance. And I think maybe at that point in time, I was probably feeling saturated in the previous company or the previous job, and the next one appeared interesting. So when people say, and I still can reflect when people used to ask me in those days, what do you want to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And I didn't know how to answer that question because I wasn't thinking in those lines. I was just doing my job to the best of the ability, and when a next job came along, which was interesting, I would just pick it up. So I had no aspiration of a salary grade or a title or even an industry, as you can see. And that's just who I am. I think there were other people who were very clear they wanted to be in banking or investment banking, had to make a certain amount of money, they wanted to retire at a certain age. So there are different aspiration different people had, and they were pursuing, I think, based on those assumptions. In my case, I had no intention of retiring early. I thought, yeah, job is a nice thing. You meet people, you do a bunch of things, you get paid, and why would I want to retire? My dad retired at 60, so I can also retire at 60 or whatever. In fact, my dad, after retiring at 60 in 76, he's very active. He does a bunch of things. So in fact, I didn't even think that retiring at 60 is a good idea. I thought one can continue working till you are dead. So anyway, so I had no such hurry to retire, and therefore I just took things as they came by, living in the moment, taking decisions as they came along, and reflecting on saying, okay, looks like since I didn't have any specific goal in mind, all the decisions looked very good. Because people say, oh, so do you have any regrets in life? And I said, no, because since I didn't have a goal, whatever happened seems to be a good one. There isn't a diversion from a goal and so on and so forth. So again, like I'm just sharing with you what happened, why it happened, what my interpretation of that is, and how I reflect on some of those things. And none of these are in any way to say this is good or bad. It is to say there is some reflection on what is going on, and using that reflection to sort of guide yourself and do something. And I think that reflection also told me that you have a life of your own, and you have to figure out what works for you. You can't be nitpicking and looking at parts of other people's life and see, but I want to have this that someone has, and that someone had, because some of that may or may not be, because every decision has all kinds of consequences. So if you do something, there are many other things will come along with it, but people took certain decisions which had other consequences. So I think what I learned was to feel good about what is important for me and what is good for me, and not keep comparing on any topic, because frankly, since it is my life, I thought as long as it is okay for me, I don't have to be worried about how does it compare to someone else, or even how does it compare to someone else's expectations of me, because that is very important as well. Because many a time we feel that our parents or friends or some other people have some expectation, and we have to quote unquote live up to that. So some of those reflections also came along in some of these things. Now, let me just give you a bit more background, about myself and my family and who I am, so that you had a better picture. And then I'll share with you a few thoughts that I then shared with my daughter. I think that will be useful, because I guess some of you are closer to that age, and I think it will be useful for me to see what you think about that advice given to her. So other than my work, I'm an outdoor person. So I like marathon running. I mean, I used to run marathons, a few of them every year. Last year was a bad year because all the pandemic happened, but I still run on weekends. I like cycling. I do badminton. So I'm an outdoor person, likes to play and things like that. And my wife is an artist and a painter. She draws. Two daughters. The elder one just started working last year. The younger one is just applying to colleges, finishing her BCom and so on. And my parents, like I said, live in Noida. My dad still goes out, teaches, and does various consulting assignments and so on. So very active. My younger brother lives in New Jersey. He's a software engineer. He just did engineering, took up a software job, and then went to the US and stayed on. So that's sort of my family situation. Now, 3 4 years ago, when my daughter was going to college, so my wife said, "Why don't you tell her what to do and what courses to choose, what career to take, and so on and so forth." So I thought, how do I summarize my learnings of my own experiences of my professional career and otherwise, and share with her something that will be relevant for her as she looks up at her career, which is the situation that many of you are in. So at that time, since she was studying economics, I said, okay, Pragya, what I'll do is let me figure out a few things that will be important, will be in future. And if you acquire those things, I mean, you'll be probably a better individual, because using economic principles, things that will hopefully be in short supply and in great demand. If you acquire those characteristics, you'll be good. So I said, let me apply economic principle to see what are the three things that I think will be in short supply, and I think in of high value. And if you can acquire them, they'll be good for you. And that's how I came up with what I at that point in time called a 3C framework. So three C's that I thought was going to be in short supply and high demand. And I derived that based on economic principles. So let me share with you how those three C's were derived at. So the first C was really looking at the trend of globalization. So 1991 is when globalization happened in India. I think all of us benefited from that. A lot of foreign companies came in, lots of growth happened. My view is that the future will be a deglobalization era. I think the globalization, in my opinion, is coming to an end, and deglobalization will begin, and it will last your lifetime, I think. And the reason I say that was because globalization created, I think, a lot of new value. Lots of value was created in the economy, but I think it wasn't shared properly. I think it sort of led to inequality. A few people got a lot of it. I would say that I got a lot of it. I mean, my salary probably increased 100 times from what it was when I started working and things like that. I don't think people who work in our homes, let's say a driver or a maid, they had any such benefit. And you look around anywhere, I don't think everyone else, maybe even the farmers and so on and so forth, they didn't necessarily benefit from it. So I think given that a large number of people didn't get benefit from it, they'll say, what's in it for me? What's the value of, or benefit of all of this growth? And I think it's a great opportunity for all the politicians to seize that and say, yeah, this is not right. I think all this globalization has been harmful thing. So let's all become Atmanirbhar. Let's close the borders. Let's erect walls and let's erect barriers. So to me, that is going to continue for a while to come in every way. So I think people will therefore become more internal centric, whether it is countries or individuals or companies or whoever. And my personal belief is that actually the future requires more collaboration, because the biggest problem in the world, whether it is global warming or water or whatever, they all require collaboration. No one can solve it in isolation. If you look at companies, it is all about collaboration, ecosystem, platform, not about individual silos. So clearly the demand outside, whether in the corporate world or the economic world or the physical world, is of collaboration, even more collaboration. But the actual activity is more of looking inward. So what will be in short supply? So in my opinion, the first C that is in short supply and is going to be in short supply is compassion. In compassion, I mean, thinking about the ecosystem, thinking about everyone else, and not thinking just about yourself. Because if you do that, then I think you'll take suboptimal decisions. So my first C based on these global macro trend was compassion is the first C. I think the second C came about from the topic of choices that I shared with you. That we had two choices: um, Lambretta or Vespa scooter, Fiat or Ambassador car, Four Hands or Colgate toothpaste or whatever. Everything had two choices. You didn't like one, or the other one had a waiting list, and you got another one. You were grateful. Life was good. Now you have 100 choices on 100 dimensions, and people can go mad. So therefore, I think what is in short supply and continue to be in short supply will be conviction, which is believing in yourself. Because there are so many choices, there are so many distractions, and people will keep telling you this is not right, that is not right. So you might keep jumping from one to the other, still stay confused, suffer from ADHD and mental illness, and so on and so forth. So therefore, how do you remain centered in yourself inside rather than on the outside? And that conviction, I think, will be the second C, which will be in short supply, because that's how the world is evolving. The third C relates to the way the world is evolving. So the world used to be very linear in I would say, 30 years. Um, Toyota came up with the method of continuous improvement. They'll say every day we'll do morning meeting. We'll make one very micro improvement. But if we did micro improvement 365 days a day, days a year, we will beat General Motors and Ford. And they did. So in a linear world, even if you did small micro improvements, incremental improvements, you could win the war. But then Tesla or Apple or Amazon or whoever came along and said the world is actually not linear. We have all these different technologies which allow it to become more non-linear. So you can't think linearly. You have to think disruptively, all of those types of things. And I don't think our minds are designed for disruptive thinking. We are all designed for very linear thinking, because that's how over the millennial the world has changed. So we are programmed biologically to think in a linear fashion and not think in geometric progression and so on. But that's what the world has become now. So I think therefore, what is in short supply and what will be in short supply will be the third C, which is creativity, where the answers are not linear. The answers can be very, very, very different. So net, I was quite happy with my 3C framework. I said, wow, what a nice way of thinking about the world and coming up with something very, scientific, not a framework without any reason. So it was compassion, which hopefully should lead to conviction on what should you do based on your understanding of the entire world, and then be creative. So these three were handed down to her, 4 years ago. And then 2 years later, I said, "Do you remember that?" And she had forgotten it. And I said, "Wow, you make such a nice framework." And by the time I had told a lot of other people, and they said, "Why, it's not just relevant for her; it's pretty much relevant for everyone, because this everyone is faced with that, not just the young people, but it's all the old people as well." So I said, "But since she doesn't remember it, as a good daddy, I need to improve the framework, add some more features to this product, and launch it again." So what did I do? I added two more C's, one C at the beginning and one C at the end, made it a 5C framework and shared with her. So so the C that was at the beginning was really about it's curiosity. So I said, unless you are curious, there's no compassion, there's no nothing. So you have to start with having a curious mind. And the last C was creativity, communication. To say if you've done something, you need to talk about it, because when you talk about it, people will give you feedback or they will ask you questions. And when that happens, that will hopefully fuel that curiosity back again and complete the cycle of that. So anyway, so I became happy again to say now I've launched a better framework for Pragya. I have to do the testing in this year to see whether she remembers or not. But I thought, this is a framework since I shared with my daughter, and I kind of liked it. I thought, why don't I share with you guys as well? So I leave, sort of pause here with saying that I had a certain life, I had some learnings, and some of the things that I've shared with you. But most likely, your life will be very different from what mine has been, because the world is going to be uh, run or evolve in a very, very radically different fashion from the other. So my general advice to everyone is that don't listen to people of my age, because most of them have been programmed in an era where those programs are no longer going to be valid. So if they are telling you something, if your parents are telling you something, do one minus of that, because most likely the reverse of that is more likely to be true. So my friends don't like me because that's what I tell their children, that don't listen to them, do something else and apply your own mind and apply your own filter to what makes sense, and don't just blindly follow what someone else told you, because no one knows the future. And the future, because it is geometric, it can't be programmed as easily, and past data is definitely not an indication of what's going to happen in future. So with that, I'll pause and look for some feedback or question, so that maybe I can share some more thoughts, and maybe if there are some interesting ideas that are coming to your head, I would love to learn from you, hear from you, because I think all of you have had your own experiences, and it'll be nice to see what you think about some of these things and what is on your mind.
Uh, so I have few questions for you, and if any student has the questions, so they can raise up their hands. We can take up those questions. So the first question which I would like to ask you is like, I read your profile. So initially you did engineering, then you switched on to MBA, and you also worked in BFSI sector. So how has been this experience?
I think all these industries have very different dynamics. So the financial industry that I'm right now on, or I was in before, and let's say the technology industry, Dell, which I was in. So there are two, I would say, industries where I spent a long time: financial services and technology. So I can just kind of compare and contrast what these two are. So I think technology is very fast moving and very innovative. You have to move really fast because competition is from everywhere. And Dell specifically was a very low margin business. Dell is not really an innovative company coming up with cool products. Their strength was in supply chain and doing things more efficiently. So it was more about efficiency rather than innovation. So there the whole dynamic was, you need to keep finding some cost saving, some benefit, and things of that nature. And you have to move really fast and keep moving around and innovating and so on. Banking, on the other hand, is quite different. It is regulated. I think the two industries that are heavily regulated are the pharma industry and the financial services industry. And the reason is the government is also, and the regulators are also worried about your health and your money. Those are the two things that we all care about a lot more, that you don't want to lose your money or your health. So those industries, because of all those regulations, I would say, are also very protected. It's not easy to enter these industries. And therefore, any industry which is protected tends to also make a lot of money, because you tend to create monopolies, because there are no new players can easily enter in. So I think this industry therefore has not, and because it is also risk averse, you don't want to lose money in doing financial services. So the culture in this industry is more with a risk lens, that the most important thing is for your clients to not lose money, and then everything else. So while on a Google or some other tech company, they would experiment, and they always will say, yeah, 9 out of 10 experiments will fail, but one will succeed, and we will sort of build. in banking you can't do that because you don't want your bank to be experimenting with your money, that one fine day you find your money missing from your saving account because the bank did an experiment. So I think the worldviews are very different. Companies operate in a different culture, different manner and all that, and I think I would say I've learned a lot from both, because I think I can relate to both those ethos on how to be concerned about your customer, taking care of their needs and then innovating. And on the tech side, there isn't such a big concern, but you innovate a lot more and you don't mind failing. In the banking industry, you do mind failing because some things can be very harmful for the financial system. Sometimes when banks fail, the economy gets impacted, all that. So I think you have to just understand the context in which you're operating, what the purpose of that company or the industry is, and within that boundary, you do what you have to do. But these two are like two extreme industries. So I would say I've experienced both and I learned a lot on both.
So next question I've got, like, you were an engineer and then into banking sector. So how difficult it is for an engineer to go into this BFSI sector? Like, it is totally considered of accounts and everything. So an engineer is not having that much knowledge about it.
I think, and I don't know what people on the call think about it. I think our education system, I think, is by and large designed not necessarily to give you skills that you can apply, but a filtering mechanism to allow employers to hire you. So I don't think any employer hires you for your knowledge, but based on whatever, and then they will train you. So I think most of the things that you learn during your engineering, you probably don't even apply even when you do a technical job, because most of the people today are doing software jobs. Well, they might have studied chemical engineering or textile or something else, but all jobs pretty much that engineers are taking up are software programming, and I don't know whether everyone did that learning. Similarly, when you do an MBA, they give you exposure to a lot of broad ideas, but it's not as if they are training you for anything very specifically. So my MBA program is also about exposing us to concepts and ideas. So I would think that the education is more of a giving you an exposure. How then you apply that exposure is up to you and how the company that employs you. That's what my reflection on the education has been. And I don't think education is very pragmatic, which can make you work immediately. I think you have to figure out how to apply those learning in a practical environment, and that you do through your on the job experience only.
Sir, as our topic is on branding, like strategic planning of brands, so one question which I've got for you is, what are your what is the core values and attributes your brand should express, like, of any company or any brand?
Yeah, so I think uh, today, if you look around, people are more focused on the purpose of the company. In the past, people used to identify the brand based on the product of the company. Apple would be known for cool products, iPhone, all of that, and things like that. But today, when I look at it, and I don't know, again, I would love to hear counter views to what I'm saying from this group, if they have any, that people are much more concerned to the purpose, because when you look at Google, they have formed a union. In the past, union used to be formed for wage negotiation. This union is about telling them that why are you investing in this defense technology, and why are you helping people with face recognition? It can be have harmful users, all that. So a lot of employees nowadays in companies are attracted to the company or detracted from them based on what those companies stand for and what they do. So to me, I think the branding, which used to be very product oriented, is becoming very purpose oriented. And I think even for individuals and people who are working, I think more and more people will be coming close to the purpose, what you stand for, and some of those things versus what you actually do. So that's my view, that the branding is moving from product to purpose.
So the next question which I've got for you is, job opportunities for fresher MBA students in foreign market.
I think, like I said, the world is deglobalized, so you should assume that there'll be no opportunity outside, because no country wants anyone to come in general. Now, obviously, there'll be exceptions, but I'm sharing with you more a general term. So my general this thing is that People don't want outsiders because right now there are job opportunities are limited. They would rather give it to their own people. So I know several students who have gone to the US, UK, otherwise. My own cousins who worked here for 4 or 5 years, they have both sort of done degrees in UK, and now they're not finding a job. Both of them are coming back to India. And there are several such examples. And the reason is simple: they don't have jobs for their own people. They would rather give it to them than give it to someone else. And that trend, I think, is likely to continue. But I think the reverse, which people are not thinking, to me, is that why are people even going abroad? The 2 or 3 trillion economy that you are a part of, that will one day become a 20 trillion economy. There's no question. The 20 trillion economy that you want to go to, that's not going to become a 200 trillion economy anytime. So why would you not stay in a place which will see rapid growth and go to a place which is going to stagnate? Now, I'm not saying going abroad is bad or any such thing. People should go and try and all of those things, get experiences. But in general, I think the opportunities that are already existing in India, I think are far more. I think when we were graduating, we all used to want to work for a multinational company because those were the companies that were, creating a lot of value. Today, I think the trend has changed. A lot of startups are there. Funding is also available. I mean, in my days, if I wanted to do a startup, no one would give us money. There was no funding ecosystem. Right now, there are so many opportunities, and suddenly lots of people are doing various things. So I do think that there are many more opportunities. You just have to be more proactive in today's day and age. I think the era of saying that I will go there, someone will tell me what to do, I'll work on it, that's gone. That actually won't even work in a large company. It can work for a while, but won't. So I think everyone wants an entrepreneur, even in a large company, and an entrepreneur otherwise. So I think the most important thing is to develop that mindset and then apply that wherever you have. I don't know whether going abroad is necessarily a great idea these days. Now, like I said, someone has to go, let's go. But I think there is so much opportunity over here, and people should try and see what they can do here.
Okay, so the last question is, what do you think is the future of business analytics, as it was mentioned in your, I mean,
Yeah, I think the world keeps evolving and changing. One has to look at those trends. So all the people, I used to, like I said, I was in Dell for a long while. I spent many years, and I know lots of people in the analytics industry. The last 5 years, I'm out of analytics. I'm doing something else. But very recently, I was involved in helping set up a digital product management team in our company, because what is happening is, and the pandemic has pushed that, the digital channel has become most important in everything, whether it is banking, whether it is your food delivery, whether even health or fitness, you are doing Zumba lessons on Zoom, everything is gone digital. So the digital channel is requiring a lot of investment. So I think a lot of people are getting into that field of digital, which is all about creating new products for customers, and these products are created in an agile fashion. So the new sort of way of working is what we call agile, where you form small scrum team, which is a mix of people with product and then technology background, and their job is to keep evolving the product in 2 week sprints. So it's the old days of developing product over 1 year is gone. Now you're saying we are kind of evolving the product very quickly, looking at what is needed, develop something, release it in 2 weeks, next 2 weeks something else, and keep iterating and so on and so forth. So I think some of those things are happening in this digital world. So I'm actually telling a lot of people who are in the data analytics field to say, you know what, while you know data analytics, why don't you enhance your capability to also learn some of these product development skills, and you can become a product manager. So my view is that in the past, process used to be supreme. I used to be in GE, process, Six Sigma. So that was the era of linear life when like process was important. Then slowly it became product. And like I said, now it has become purpose. So from process to product to purpose, the three P's, not that the previous two have disappeared, this someone else has become more prominent than the other. So I think that's how people need to think about, don't think of yourself as a business analytics person or some other person, all that. Eventually you have to, there are frankly probably just two jobs out there. One is something which is related to a customer or a product, the other which is related to engineering. So either you are getting deep into engineering or you are getting close to customers. So you have to make that choice on which side you go. Usually it is possible that since you have chosen an MBA, you are more likely to go onto the product side. Otherwise, you would have remained an engineer and developing deep tech expertise. So think about yourself in a more broader way, not in a silo of business analytics or any such thing, because all those silos in isolation will not be helpful. You have to think of your skill set as a Swiss knife. One knife will not do. So keep adding to it, because there's no end to it. The new things will keep coming, and being stuck in one identity can make you obsolete very quickly.
Sir, I have one question for behalf of my students. 2 months down the line, they'll be doing their summer internship. So if you can just guide which will be the better industries when we look from the finance students' point of view. What are the scopes and opportunities available for my finance students when it comes to summer internship?
Yeah. See, like my view is that, two, three things I'll share. One is these days, many a times, opportunities are far and few. So people get very unhappy that, oh, I didn't get the thing that I wanted, or this, that, and the other. Like I said, my own view is that it's a long life. All the people in this call, I think your average life expectancy is 100 years. So if you're 25, you have 75 more years to go. So बहुत लंबी जिंदगी है, right? There's lots can happen. I don't think anyone can protect what will happen in 75 years from now. So don't get too bogged down by your summer internship, your first job, even your first 5 years. Look at things can happen very quickly. So like I said, since it is not a linear word, you can never be left out. You decide what you want to do. You can leapfrog, you can do different things. So I think the overthinking about the summer internship or the first job or whatever it is, or the domain, is a reflection of the old waterfall or the old linear thinking. Today it doesn't matter. So I told my daughter, whatever job you get, whatever boss you get, start, because life is like that agile sprint. Every 2 weeks you can change the feature that you want to release in the next sprint. You don't have to bog down by a linear thinking. So I just think that initial focus should be more on understanding the softer skills of success, because the academic world teaches you more of the harder skills on what some of these things are, but the application is not taught. So if you are going for a summer internship, try to learn dunyadari. That is the most important thing. How do you connect with people? How do you collaborate? How do people think? How do we together become successful? Because like I said, that first C of compassion, on how do you think about the broader picture? How do you connect the dots? All of those things are more important. I think the technical skills or whatever else is there, you'll picked up. That's not difficult. But the other things, there aren't easy ways. No one teaches you. You have to learn it on your own. Find mentors, find guides. Don't worry about how much they pay you in your summer internship. Don't worry about what they pay in your first job. Focus on learning. And like I said, if you keep focused on learning and keeping yourself updated, over time, I think if you want to monetize it and all of that, you'll get those opportunities. So that's how I would like you to think.
Last question from my side. Sir, when we see MBA who have the non-technical background, so according to you, what are the opportunities for them? Like as you have been experienced in Dell, for them in a company or a product companies like Dell or Lenovo. So
Yeah.
job opportunity market basically.
Yeah. I think some of you who are following the technology, this thing, would also be starting to hear about low code and no code. So what people are saying that, maybe you don't need to know coding at all, because all these AI ML engines will eliminate the need for coding. And frankly, a lot of coding was really see, whatever you can define, an AI ML can create. So if something is objective, that code can be created today. Only thing that can't be explained or defined is where the human judgment comes in. So I think over time you should expect all of these technologies to be able to automate any rational thing that happen in life, which includes most of the coding that we do today. So I don't know whether coding is the greatest and latest skill, and it used to be. In the last 5-10 years, everyone has become a coder. I don't know for the next 10 years but that's the most important skill. In fact, so two things there. I have seen many people who were BCom graduates who have picked up coding to the extent required and doing very well. So that's one. The other is that you probably don't need to know all of those things. You can know a bit of it, and you can be on the product side, and you know how to connect to the customer and what the customer needs. So I don't think anything that you can't be sure of anything. Let me put it this way. I think what you can be sure of is what is it that you like to do and what is it that you can be good at. And we can't be good at everything. I tried playing golf. I hated it. I started running. I'm loving it. I tried tennis. I couldn't do it. I tried badminton. I'm loving it. So over time, with experiments, you'll realize what you can be good at, or at least even if you're not good at, you enjoy doing it. So I would say that over time, if you can discover what you are good at or what you enjoy doing, the market for that also exists. See, in the past, the market was very limited. So you had to align yourself to the market. Today, as long as you can figure out what you are, you can find your own market because there is a market for everything. So I think that is another line of thinking that is different now. That in the past, because there were just two markets, engineering and doctor, you had to choose one of the two. Now there are thousands of markets and new markets are getting created. So what you have to again do is to focus inward and say, okay, what am I good, what can I be good at? And what do I enjoy doing? And as long as I figure that out, then I see where do I fit in? Where is my market? I would reverse the question now instead of saying, so because people are again say, where is the trend? Where is the growth? I said, forget it. Wherever you are, that will create growth. So it's the other way of thinking. Like I said, everything to me is now one minus. Whatever was the mental model before, turn it on its head. The other one is probably like more likely to be true.
So, sir, shall we conclude now? I guess students are not having any questions. I mean, all the
Great.
questions are done.
So good, nice to be here, and hope people have triggered some thoughts in their head. I think I look at all of these talks as a way to maybe trigger one thought in someone's head who can then do something different than what they were thinking originally.
Okay, sir. So I will also conclude. Thank you so much, sir, for this wonderful session. It was full of knowledge and liveliness. I am sure students would have learned a lot from your shared experiences and would have enjoyed this session to the core. Best wishes to your future endeavors, sir, with the hope of meeting you again. And thank you so much, students, for attending this session.